So I am recording now, and I do want to thank everybody for joining today. These sessions are part of funding that we've received from the U.S. Botanic Garden and American Public Garden Association, and so we're able to provide these classes free of charge for folks. And again, these are 30-minute sessions, and I know there's a lot of information to cover. We'll get through as much as we can. What we're going to do today is going to be talking about cold frames and a little bit about season extension for growing vegetables. And you know, obviously, we probably won't be able to get to all your specific answers or answer to questions, so you can email me again at the end of the session. And then I'll also have a little evaluation for you, for everybody to share, fill out. So I am sharing my PowerPoint screen. Again, if anybody has any issues with that, please let me know. And I'm going to be pulling up the chat real quick so I can, just in case there's any issues that you have. Again, my name is Derek Stowell. I am the Education and Horticulture Therapy Program Administrator for the UT Gardens, and we are going to go over cold frames today with your gardens. And so I've got some photos in throughout the PowerPoint. I'll kind of discuss those as examples of cold frames that you could use. The one on the first screen here, it is a one we have in our kitchen garden at the UT Gardens in Knoxville. It is a wood construction frame with some windows and hinges on them. And you'll notice in this picture there are celery we have growing in those, and I believe that was from this past spring. So, you know, for Tennessee, we kind of have 3 growing seasons in Tennessee. And you know, we have our spring cool season. It's typically February, March through June. Summer warm season, which is May through September, and fall cool season, August through October, November-ish. And so it gives you fairly almost year-round ability to grow things in the garden, and cold frames can help us kind of extend that just a little bit longer. So, you know, the goal, obviously, for season extenders and cold frames is to help extend our growing season, help us grow more produce, and help us get the produce, the plants to the size where they're producing food for us a little quicker. So I can be impatient sometimes when I'm growing plants, and so cold frames work because I can start things a little sooner and get them out. So you can do some temporary things for season extension, and then you can also do some more permanent things with more expensive constructed cold frames. And again, costs can be fairly inexpensive to high cost, depending on how detailed and how elaborate you want to get with your systems. So some temporary methods, and this helps us with protecting plants in cooler seasons, and things like mulching adds an extra layer of warmth for plants. Mulching won't do a whole lot when it comes to planting things and you get a hard frost or hard freeze, but it will help us keep the soil and keep the roots of those plants a little bit warmer as they're growing, as cool nights come along, particularly at the end of April, beginning of May. Floating row covers is another method. And these are kind of fabric covers you can put over crops to help, one, keep frost off the plants. They also are actually fairly helpful with pests. I use floating row cover sometimes with zucchini and yellow squash in the summer to keep the vine borers off of them. So black plastic can be used, placed around the ground, and people, you'll see this a lot if you go strawberry picking, and it helps increase the soil temperature for germination, and also helps increase the soil temperature for the root growth and initial stages of the plants, and kind of helps keep moisture in. And then a low tunnel is another method. So a low tunnel is a little more elaborate than, let's say, using mulch or a row cover or black plastic. And so the photo here is an example of a low tunnel. And so you may have heard of high tunnels, and those are used a lot in big agricultural production systems, which are large greenhouse type systems. The low tunnel is obviously a small one. It's something you can do in your backyard fairly easily. And so you would need wire or some thinner PVC that you can bend, and you can hammer those into the ground or put stakes into them, or attach them with clamps to a wood frame. And then you just get some sheet plastic to put over top of it, and you leave the sides to where this one has some wood staple to it, so you can lift them up and you can water. And if it gets too hot, you can also remove them and as needed for a little bit of ventilation. So again, that's some lower cost ways to try to extend your growing season and allow your plants to grow in cooler temperatures. So to mention floating row covers, this is a picture we have at our kitchen garden. And this is, you can see here is a white fabric floating row cover. And this, I think, brand is Arbigron. There's other brands you can get. This one, you can get a 10 by 50 foot piece of this for $16 at Johnny Seed. I looked online real quick before this class. Local garden centers probably sell these too, and obviously other online retailers you can get these. And again, I use these for some pest control methods too during the growing season, so they're very helpful. They won't last. 1 or 2 seasons, depending on how harsh the conditions are. But they're also, again, not very expensive. So cold frames, these tend to be a little bit more constructed systems. One thing to keep in mind is you're not really, because you don't have a heat supply in that cold frame, they usually don't add 5 to 10 degrees warmth or temperature to your plant. So let's say if it's 30 degrees out, you're only going to get, it's going to be about 40 degrees in there. So things like tomatoes aren't going to do well when it's that cold out and grow and produce like that. So they also, cold frames are helpful with sheltering and hardening off tender plants. And so hardening off is something you do, particularly if you sow your seeds on your own in your house. You have a grow light or just have a large window, south-facing window preferably. You can start your seeds early. The one thing is you need to harden them off, and so that you need to slowly adjust them to cooler temperatures, more direct sunlight, and you can do that over the course of like a week-long period. And cold frames is a way to help us do that. And I've done before. I've gotten a little, like I said, I can be impatient, so I've had some seedlings and I just put right outside, direct sunlight, and you can actually sunburn your plants doing that because they're not used to that intense light. So you do need to harden them off, and cold frames can help do that. Some important things when you're placing out your cold frame, you do want to make sure that you angle the windows or the slanted glass or plastic with a southern exposure, and that allows you to have a more sunlight getting in and getting that sun's energy and heating up the space for your greenhouse. You can do in-ground or raised cold frames.
Yeah.
These are, in-ground, obviously you have the soil surrounding you that kind of helps buffer the temperature changes. Raised ones could get colder more quicker. They also dry out more often, so you need to water them more often. And any cold frame you set up, you do want to make sure that you do have adequate drainage. So, if you have a really heavy clay soil, you need to add, amend your soil a little bit to get some better drainage. So the plants, if you're putting them directly in the soil there, they don't rot. The roots get enough drainage to grow well. This photo is a system that I just found out about called VegPod. I think Stanley's Greenhouse actually found out through them. They actually are selling these right now. So it's a raised bed system, and it has a top canopy you can put on it. I'm not sure, couldn't tell from the picture if this is a row cover type system or if it's a plastic, but I believe there's a plastic you can put over top of it to act like a cold frame. And you can see here they've got a lot of great cool season. It looks like Swiss chard mostly growing in here. So it's a couple $100, $200 or $300 investment, I think, for these. But if you have a small space and you don't want to do in-ground bed, these are a good solution. You can do some semi-temporary cold frames. This photo is from a blog, Autonomy Acres, but straw bales and plexiglass, plastic, or polycarbonate, or even old windows. And so this, you can see that they've created a frame with the straw bales. And they have a piece of, I think that's polycarbonate, which is a plastic, and I'm going to show a photo of that in just a minute. But those systems, and he's got a board across to kind of keep it from sagging in the middle. And so it adds, the straw adds a lot of insulation. You've probably seen in the past where people have straw bale houses, and they use straw bales for insulating the walls. So they have a good insulation factor. It's a little less expensive than building a wood or brick cold frame. So windows, people use old windows sometimes for cold frames. They one of the things is you do want to test them if you have old chipping paint on those windows, particularly for lead. You can get a lead test kit, at a local home center, just to be safe, or use newer windows to make sure you don't have any lead that might flake off into your garden. Plastic, again, is something that's easy to install. You might want to have a wood frame around the straw bale to keep it in place, and you can lift it up and lower it. The plastic obviously won't last as long. And then polycarbonate is a little bit more expensive, but it's more durable and will last a little bit longer than the regular plastic. So the polycarbonate, if you've not seen this before, it is looks like almost like a piece of corrugated plastic, and so there's little cells in there, and so it's kind of got two layers, and then it's a rigid plastic, and it has some insulation properties, and can be used in constructing a homemade greenhouse. You can use these, and they're fairly inexpensive. I mean, it's 4 by 8 foot sheet is about $80 at Lowe's right now that I looked up, and so you can get that, and you cut that down to whatever size you might want for your cold frame. So some benefits of building a straw cold frame like this is one, once the weather gets warmer, you can take the plastic off or take your windows off, and then you can have take your straw bales and use it as mulch for your garden. A good example of this could work is if you like to plant out your warm season vegetables real early. If you want to put straw bales around and make cold frames, that can help protect them in the early spring. You'll find a lot of people will start selling tomatoes in early April, and they usually do that everybody likes to buy them and put them in the ground, and tends to, you're going to get frost and kill them, and you have to get some more tomatoes. So in Knoxville area particularly, our last frost date's around April 22nd. So usually you don't want to plant anything warm season like tomatoes out until after that date. And even after that date, you could have a chance of a frost, up into, the beginning part of May at times. And so if you want to protect your plants, you're going to put straw down anyway, you could get the straw ahead of time, put these out. You may be able to put these out maybe even a week earlier than the August 22nd date, but you, again, want to check your frost dates and check the forecast to make sure you don't put them out and they get too cold. But then you can place the plexiglass over top of it, or the polycarbonate, and that'll help them keep them warm, and maybe get you an extra week of growing with the tomatoes. But then once the season, once it warms up, you can just take those out, take the bales up apart, and mulch your garden with it. Constructed cold frames, these are can be brick or wood, and obviously when you're doing a wood constructed cold frame, you want to use something like untreated lumber as much as possible. So cedar works really well. In our gardens, we've installed some new timbers, and we use like a white oak that we bought from a local sawmill that is supposed to last almost as long as cedar wood. But the treated lumber does have some chemicals that may leach into soil, so that's why you don't want to use those. They are obviously a little bit higher cost. The wood or the brick can be expensive. However, they are much longer lasting and sturdier. And also, if you design them to match your house and your garden, it's actually a nice aesthetic addition to your garden space. You do want to have no bottom with soil, and it drains well. These do not have a heat source. They rely on passive solar, the sun entering the glass, heating up the space in there, and keeping it warm overnight, warmer than the surrounding ground or area outside of that. On this photo, this again is our kitchen garden. You can see we've got hinges on there, and you do want to be able to, as it warms up, you do want to come out and open these up and allow them to vent. If you don't do that, you could it could get hotter in there and kill the plants or harm the plants. And so it's important to remember that venting is an important part of cold frames. And someone said, speaking of cedar, does the wood chips go okay in compost, or does it prevent growth? So if you do have like cedar wood chips, if you're cutting a lumber, yeah, you can put that in compost and that would be fine. Again, it doesn't compost as quickly as or break down as quickly as other wood products. Size of your cold frames is going to depend on your budget. And so this is a photo I took several years ago at Chicago Botanic Garden. And so this is in their home garden, kitchen garden area. So obviously this is, they went out pretty all expenses on this. And so you can see a couple things. Their frames are wood with handles. They also have, looks like it's a polycarbonate material that are on those frames. And then you notice there's some pistons that help hold those up. And so you can buy these pistons, and so it helps with opening and closing. I did look online the other day. They're about $16 a pair. So it's not too expensive. Another benefit of where they've located this one, or these cold frames, are you see there's another glass house behind it, and there's bricks, and there's a gravel surface and a sidewalk. And so any of that rock surfaces will absorb the sun's energy, and it'll actually help radiate back out into that cold frame a little bit overnight, and so to kind of keep that temperature just a little warmer. So that's also something to think about if you have a nice brick house or stone house. If you want to put a cold frame against there, if you have the right facing, the south facing side, it could help with temperature and keeping it just a little bit warmer for your plants. You can buy automatic vents. So if you're obviously out of town and it gets too hot, they're expensive. So this example, our kitchen garden manager showed me, it's $73 for one of these. And so you would have to, obviously buy it and follow instructions for setting up. But it's a piston-like system, and they'll open up when it gets to a certain temperature to keep your plants from getting too hot. So some things to think about with planting in a cold frame. So, talked a little bit about basics of cold frame and choices you might want to consider. So these are some things to think about when you're putting plants in there. So obviously you're not going to be able to put tomatoes in January in your cold frames in East Tennessee. You want to do that middle of April. You can do that. Again, look for your extended forecast too, just to kind of watch any unusual weather patterns. Our frost dates, again, is around April 22nd. So that's kind of the last average frost. That means that, statistically speaking, there's less chance of having frost after that date. Doesn't mean it won't happen. And then obviously, and then our first frost date is in October, around October 17th. Again, statistically speaking, it's average over a certain period of time. I think every 10 years they update this average based on the average temperatures and the average frosts. And so that doesn't mean that you can't grow past October, but there's a good chance you have a killing frost sometime after the 17th in October. So some of the things is, one thing you can do is if you're going to sow directly in a cold frame, which you can do, you want to make sure your frame is in place at least 2 weeks before you sow the seed. And what that'll do is that'll help warm up the soil that you're sowing into. Obviously, if you're in a cold climate in the middle of winter, the soil temperatures are much lower. And so allowing the cold frame to get there, the sun will heat that soil up a little bit. You have to have a certain temperature for seeds to germinate. And so that's why you need at least 2 weeks to kind of warm up that soil. If you're growing greens in your cold frame, you don't want them to get too large. So this will depend upon the size of your cold frame, but you do want to harvest them before they get to the point where the leaves are pushing up against the glass or up against the top of the cold frame. So, in some of the examples we had 3 to 4 inches, depending on how you build your cold frame of height, you want to harvest those greens. One example of something you could do, experiment with is, sow lettuce, spinach, arugula in January in a cold frame, and then you could potentially harvest that in March here in East Tennessee. You can also, if you are things like broccolis and cabbages, you can sow those inside. Tend to want to sow those in late January, February, and plant out. You would want to make sure you plant those out. You can plant them in your cold frame and let them grow. And then as they get bigger, you can just leave the top off. And obviously, once the things like cabbage and broccoli are big enough, they're not going to be affected too much by really cold temperatures, and they can handle a light frost usually. Fall is a good time to sow salad greens, leeks, and radishes in a cold frame, and you potentially could harvest those through December. And again, falls. We've had peas growing in our garden through January sometimes. On winters here. We've had winters at times when it's been 80 degrees on Christmas. So that's out of the norm a little bit, but you can, with a cold frame, you can definitely extend your growing through November and some of December. The only thing that happens with your cold frames or plants once you get more towards November, towards December, is the fact that you're getting less and less daylight. So the plants have less light to grow. They're not going to grow as quickly. It'll take longer for them to produce. So that's just something you just kind of, you'll see. You won't see the growth as rapidly as you would maybe in the springtime when you plant something in the cold frame, because you've got increasing daylight. You've got increasing temperatures for those plants. And then you also, with cold frame, you can place your plants in there, allow them to harden off for about a week in the cold frame before you plant out. Excuse me. And so again, that allows the plants to adjust to outside temperature, particularly if you have a greenhouse or if you have a grow light inside or sow your seeds inside. So that's kind of a quick. I've got a couple resources for you to go to also, and then you can send me an email if you have any other questions. But I do want to thank the U.S. Botanic Garden and the American Public Garden Association for the funding for our Helping Hands Kitchen Garden. We've been able to hire a summer intern, and we've been growing produce in our kitchen garden to help support local food pantries. And we've been able to offer a series of free classes in the community related to gardening and try to help people get some skills and information needed to have successful vegetable gardens. There is an online survey related to this class. I will send everybody an email with that link, but the link is here also. And if you could just take a few minutes to fill it out, that goes directly to the funders, so they can see the results of what their funding is doing today. So I do want to thank them for that. A couple quick resources. Again, if you more detailed information about vegetables, what to grow, when to plant. University of Tennessee Extension has a lot of great free online resources. These are three that I use a lot and I find very helpful. One is a Tennessee Vegetable Garden season extension method. So it gives you a little more details about some of the season extension methods. This will be on YouTube, so you can go back and check these links out. Tennessee Home Vegetable Garden Calendar. And I've got that pulled up and I'll show you that. This is produced by Natalie Bumgardner, who is our consumer horticulture specialist and also the master gardener coordinator for the state. She produces these every year and kind of tells you when to plant seeds. So it's a great resource. This is the 2020 calendar. So those dates will be a little different for next year. So she'll probably have the next one out coming sometime later in the fall. And this other publication is the Tennessee Vegetable Gardener Plant Preparation and Planting resource. So I'm going to switch over to that real quick. And give everybody just a quick overview. So this is the calendar. The great thing is it breaks it up. It tells you about frost dates throughout the whole state. Talks about what different tasks you can do from sowing seeds to ordering seeds, and gives you a calendar. Talks about East, Middle, and West Tennessee and when to plant things. So this is good if you're beginning. You're thinking, when do I need to sow my seeds? This is a great helpful resource. That is all I have for information about cold frames today. So if you have any specific questions, you can send some in the chat. I'm going to be on for about a few minutes to answer those. And then if you have any more detailed questions I'm not able to answer just in the time that we have, just send me an email and I'll get you those answers. So I do want to thank everybody for coming today and hope you get inspired to build a couple cold frames for next growing season and enjoy growing.